Hey up YouTube, so in this video today it's going to be another part of the starting a gardening business within the UK series. And basically, remember, it's not how to, it's things that sort of I've done, hopefully mistakes that I have made, I'll tell you about, you won't make them, tips and advice. And it's just, you know, it's a different look at things, and it's things that I've picked up on that have caught me out that hopefully won't catch you out. So I'm going to talk about commercial work. I'm not an expert at all, I'll be honest with you. I'd say proportionally, I'd say commercial work makes up about probably 20% of my main income. So it's, you know, not a great deal, but time wise I do find I can earn a lot more doing the commercial work than I can the gardening. And in a weird sort of way, I do actually enjoy it more. I think it's because it's left to me and I'm on my own. I don't see anybody, so I'll explain as we get going. So my first ever commercial job that I got was looking after I think it's best described as a showroom, and then you can get sort of a picture of what the building looks like. So it's on the side of a very busy road, and there's a nice big grass verge that goes all around it, and that was the main, well, when I quoted it, that's what I thought the main chunk of the work was, that it was the grass. Well, yes, I was right, spring and summer, but I'll be honest with you, I overlooked one thing. So the brief was that they wanted the place, the car park, keeping clean and tidy, safe for customers, and the grass verge doing. Basically, the site was to be kept to an overall tidy standard. So what I needed to do was do the verge, keep on top of the car park. There was another car park that needed doing as well, and there was a set of stairs that were for like the workers and staff to use, but the public didn't use that, but it did need again to be kept clean and tidy. And surface area, it was a big site, very big site, but it wasn't like there was a lot to do on the big site, if you get what I mean. It wasn't like there was borders and stuff, it was just a grass verge. So I went into it, I gave them a price, and there's one thing I overlooked, which was the trees. There was a few trees, and what the trees have on them, leaves, and what the trees do in winter and autumn, they drop the leaves. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I did it, but thinking back, I must have just priced it thinking, yep, you know, grass, that's no problem, that's the big one. And you know, nipping off branches here and there, you know, again, that's like another job. Not the fact that when it's getting late on in the season, it'll still be the grass and it will be clipped in a shit ton of leaves, and that leaves, you know, because of different species of trees, it seemed to drop leaves all up until probably about Christmas time, and after Christmas it went. So I think with commercial work, sometimes I think there's some where you win some, you lose some, and like some visits, sorry, that's the impression that I get, and that's what I was banking on. I thought, oh well, once the grass is done, it'll be nice and easy. Well, it wasn't, because the leaves took over. There was a period in January and March where it did quieten down, and it was very straightforward, very, very easy. But for the rest of the time, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't price it enough. I'm sure they said to me that they had a quote for like £750 a month or something, like a visit, and I think I went in at 125. So, you know, as you can imagine, I'd reckon on average there's probably a couple of hours of work there. Waste was left on site, so it was straightforward. And to be fair on it, I did, you know, in my eyes, I did earn, you know, the money that I think I needed to earn. But I think if I was to quote it again, well, if I get it back, because at the moment they're refurbing the showroom, so he said he'll contact me when they're back open. So I am going to renegotiate it, and we'll see. But that was my first foray into commercial work, and I remember going in with like risk assessments and stuff like that, and you know, and they never asked for it. And I'm not saying they never will. I think it's a good sort of thing to get into that habit of having risk assessments. You know, and that's the furthest I've delved into it. Risk assessments and making sure I've got a copy of my public liability if they need it. Now, another thing as well for why I priced it the way I did, because it probably worked out about between probably £40 and £60 an hour, depending on, you know, how much work there was. Sometimes I was there 2 hours, sometimes I was there 3 hours. The reason I priced it at that instead of pricing it like a residential job or like a residential hourly rate was because the risk that was associated. As I said, I'm not an expert, but I do think there is parallels with all these that you need to look at, and it's risk. So for me, mowing that verge was a risk to me. It was on a blind bend and it was dangerous. It's one of them where if a lorry whizzes past and you've got, you know, you're doing a turn where you're turning your deck out and the deck's on the road, it'll hit it. Same with you know, your strimmer, because it sticks out the back, it could hit that. So you've got to be very careful. So it's high vis, no hearing protection and eye protection, so I can see and I can be aware of if it is that, you know, I'm coming into contact or possibly coming into contact with, you know, anybody that's coming up. You've just got to be so careful. And then another one as well was there was big massive windows. You know, if I hit one of them, I'm in the shit. I am, you know, put into public liability. It's my insurance job. There's no way I can afford that, because these panes of glass are massive. So again, got to be so careful, and I think you do need to price that into it. That was the place actually I smashed my window. I still don't know how I did it. It must have been just because I cleaned the van out and I never found a stone, so it must just have been just the freak shot where it must have hit something and bounced off and then bounced into it or something. I have no idea. But you know, if it wasn't my window, it could have been theirs, and it would have been a whole different story. So in a way, I'm kind of glad it was my window. So as I said, so that's my first commercial job. I've had other ones. I did bits of work for a cafe. That was okay. But that was more like you were working for some, you know, like a residential customer. But the reason I'm mentioning it is another thing that I think with commercial work that you need to be made aware of is people, the Joe Blogs public, are idiots. Absolute idiots. If there's an empty car park and you park your van in such a way where you can wheel your mower out, they will pick a space behind where your ramps will be going. If you are strimming or tidying up, like I remember I was strimming around the cafe, so I either used to go really early or really late. I found actually it was better to be there really late on at night because the car park was empty. But I've had it where I was strimming right around the benches and people would come and sit, like they'd look at the benches that have been strimmed and they'd sit next to one that haven't, or I'd be strimming and they'd come and sit next to me. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think the public, you know, it's their right, I suppose, they can sit where they want, but there's no common sense with people at all. They will, you know, they will sit, they'll come and tap you on the shoulder and ask you what you're doing as you're strimming. You know, they'll do stuff like that. And as I said, car parks, customers, people, it's all a risk. You know, you could be strimming, you could be mowing, you know, you could flick a brick up, a stone, you know, anything. Could be like Final Destination. You know, you could, and this is another thing as well, you've got to really be careful and look around you and think what risks are. The amount of times I see the council contractors strimming and they're right next to cars, and you know, you can see the grass is stuck to the cars. I'm thinking, well, you know, one's if a brick chip, you know, a bit of stone chips up, you've smashed it. Well, they probably won't care because they work for somebody. and they've been told to get it done. But I think us as self-employed, we've got to be aware of these little risks all of the time. Don't ever think, you know, it might not happen. So as I said, that's why I go at night, to reduce that risk. And as I said, from my experience of working around people for years now, all my working life I've had a customer facing role. There is some people that have just, they could be doctors, lawyers, lorry drivers, professionals, bin men, you know, they could be any walk of life, but some people have just got zero common sense. On that job where there was that blind bend where I used to strim, I was strimming one day and I was in my own little world, because, you know, I'm thinking, right, I don't want to get hit by a car, so I've got to make sure where I'm treading, make sure if I'm, you know, turning the strimmer, basically make sure all myself is on the verge all the time, strimming along, getting proper little, you know, got into my own little world. And I could see, you know, like a little bit of my vision, I could just see a shadow and I could hear a noise. So I looked and there was this couple just stopped. They didn't tuck in, they literally stopped in the middle of the road on a blind bend, and then I could see other cars seeing them and stopping, and they were holding the traffic. It's a very busy road, this is, and they were shouting at me. I'm thinking, oh fucking hell, I put a window through. Again, that's something that can happen. And she goes, waving, she goes, and bearing in mind, you can get access, you could just drive up, turn left into the place, and you could double back on the, you know, on their car park. No, they chose to just shout at me, do you know the way to this cafe? I says, come on the car park, you're holding the traffic up, you're holding the flow of traffic up. No, how long, where do we need to go? I've no idea. But as I said, common sense with some people, there's just zero of it. Some people are just so stupid and just so, you know, in their own little world. So that's why I'm mentioning that little story, so you can, you know, it's not just the place, it's also the people and what's there. So I've got another job, and it's on an industrial estate, and I don't even know what they do actually. It's like a warehouse, and there's like a nice front garden bit, and then the rest of it is just car park. And they have, I think they have about 14 staff there. So again, for me, I always, if it's staff, customers, I always prefer either late evening or on the weekend when they're closed. And she said to me, oh, she says, when do you think you're coming? Because we had one bloke come and we had to move all the cars and all that. I'm like, well, no, I won't be asking you to do that. I says, commercial work, I'll always do it on the weekend, and then people are away. She said, oh, that's brilliant. And she gave me a key for the place, and I can go up there, I can open the gates, drive in, lock myself in. It's nice high fence. I can lock myself in, and I can literally just crack on at my sort of heart's content. I'm not interrupted by anybody. I'm not interrupted by, you know, it's a nice working environment, opposed to being there when everybody's there and you've got to move cars. It's just a pain in the arse, and that's one thing I've always done. I did one job where it was a gutter job actually, for, you know, a commercial job, and I did it in the day, and they had to move the cars, and it's a pain in the arse, a proper pain in the arse. So we don't want to do that. I always say to people, I'm here to make their life easier, and normally by me saying that, it actually benefits me as well, because if I'm making their life easier, I'm making my life easier as well. So as I said, I've never dabbled with, quote, you know, like tenders and stuff like that. I'd like, if one come up and I saw it, yeah, I'd put a bid in. Another one, now I quoted on it and I didn't get the job, and it was of one of my gardening customers. Her granddaughter is like, she looks after a load of bungalows, and I think there's like 34 bungalows all on one road. Maybe this is me overthinking it, and she wanted a price to maintain the front gardens. So the front gardens needed to be maintained, and she wanted the power washing doing once a year or something. And yeah, no problem. I went and quoted on it, and I'll be honest with you, maybe I overthought it, and then by overthinking it I overpriced it. I think I went in at something like £350 for a 4 weekly visit, or once a month 350, something like that. Now that could be way over or way under, and the reason I got to that price was I thought about it, and I thought, well, there is 34 properties, but then I looked at how much work there needs doing. I'm thinking, well, you know, in my eyes that could be a day, or it could be a day and a half, you know, just to keep everywhere nice and tidy. I also factored in, you know, that some people might not want the gardens doing, they might do it themselves. And then I also factored in that actually some people might be extremely picky, extremely fussy. Now I know with commercial work it's got that stigma of almost like, well, it is what it is, just thrash it down, and I've never ever sort of kept to that. I've always tried to do the best job I can for everybody. Basically everybody gets the same, but I do understand in a commercial setting the need for just get it done, you know. And that's what I applied to this property, that there might be some people that are extremely fussy and extremely demanding, and they'll take your time up. Basically they could be nightmares. Also, I am familiar with that road. I've been on it before. I've worked on another property at the bottom of it, and indeed the customers there are fussy buggers. The people who live there, they're very pedantic about parking. Everyone has got like a homemade sign. The lady at the bottom of the cul-de-sac, because that's where people tend to park, there's angry signs, you know, put everywhere. Please do not park, you know. One was like, your vehicle is left in your own hands if you park here, something like that. I was like, Jesus, like super passive aggressive. And maybe I factored that in as well in the price, thinking, well, I could be here and there could be some nightmare customers, there could be people that are just on and on over stuff. So as I said, I did factor all of that in, and I put the price in, and I never heard anything back off it. But then I heard back off like a month later or something, and then basically somebody else got the job, and I says to her, I explained, I says, well, Luke, I said, you know, this is my first crack at quoting something this large. You know, would you be able to tell me what the other bloke charged? Not to compete with him or undercut him, just to get a rough idea. And the other bloke went in at 120. And, you know, I'm thinking, well, there's 34 properties there. Even, like, to me, even if it's half a day's work, you know, and you've got to take the waste away, to me that was very low. But, you know, as I said, it's not all sort of, you know, shining things. I'm sure he's making money off it, you know. I have no idea at all. But, you know, and I think sometimes as well, you've got to look ahead and you've got to imagine, you know, the worst case scenario. But then it's a fine balance, because you can't charge the worst case, you know, all the time, because people think, well, that's a bloody bit steep, that is. So one of my sites, so the industrial estate one, and I've done other ones as well. I do work for this lady periodically. One of them is, again, it's an industrial site. It's like a little warehouse and like a little car garage thing. That's okay, but it's such a mess. There's crap everywhere, so it's very hard to sort. You do it, you get the shrubs done, you get the stuff done, but then there's like half a car next to it and loads of litter. I'm not on about litter. I'm on about like engine blocks, you know, or a shit ton, like loads of barrels of oil that are leaking everywhere. It's stuff like that. And then another one that I do is looking after it's like a rented accommodation, and it's bleak, it really is. I'm not being harsh, but again, that has its own little sets of problems. So I do that, and every time I had one bloke who would never leave me alone, always talking, always asking questions. And then another side which is fenced off, so it can be shut, it's got a gate. The site, this area, it's like a car park, but only one person parks there. It's got no public facing access, no one can get into it, and she wanted it spraying off with weed killer. And to me, that's perfectly safe to do it. It can be locked, it's safe, you know, but even that had its own complications. What you're spraying, what is it? And people were like, can we take the name of the weed killer in case we get ill? I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, like, you know, like what you're trying to pull here? But, you know, I suppose that is, and it's, as I said at the start, it's public facing, it's people facing. So there's always that. I think the good thing about commercial work is that there's a need for it. It's not necessarily a want or a desire. It's the fact that that site needs to be maintained to a certain standard for either safety of the public or safety of the staff. So you've got that thing that it needs to be maintained all throughout the year, and as such you can get a sort of a steady-ish wage off it. So there's one thing that I always try and do. So there's one with the commercial site that I do, the industrial estate. It's a very good site, and it's very, when I first went there and when I went there now, it's very tidy. It's really nice actually, and we broke the back of it. And I'll be honest with you, the fee that I charge, I am very, very, very happy with it. It's very good. But I always try and go a bit above and beyond for that, because it's a high fee, especially during the winter periods. When it's summertime, the grass is not, so there's no grass, but the weeds are growing and the plants are growing, and they need sort of regular care. She's got a lot of rose bushes, so one of the session is spent pruning them back so they, you know, stay healthy. But when you look at it, is it worth that amount? It's subjective, but it's for a business. It's for a businessman, you know, looking over and ticking the box. Yep, site's done, site's clean, site's, you know, site's safe and secure, whatever. My staff aren't going to injure themselves. But what I always try and do with it as well is I try and go a little bit above and beyond with it. So for me, mulch, so I put mulch on the beds for her, and every winter I just top it up free of charge. So I go to me guy, I get the mulch off, I get a trailer full of mulch, 20 quid, and I just, you know, shovel it on, and it's done, and it's topped up, and it just looks nice all year round. And the mulch helps me because it cuts down on weeding. So I always try and do stuff like that. And then it's like other little bits. The porch, she's got like a glass porch, and I noticed that it just where the workmen go in, it's just scuffed it and it's just dirty. So I just restored it basically. So it went from being black and dirty back to being nice and white and clean. You know, just do little bits like that just to help people. As I said, they might not pick up on it, but I always include it on the invoice. So I'll just invoice for it, but I use Zoho Books, and I'll get onto that in a bit. So I use Zoho Books, and you can see where each item you can invoice for. So I'll invoice and charge for the garden visit. So I'll put, like, you know, 4 weekly maintenance, what's been done or what's been included. You know, I always include like a covering thing, so site to be kept to an overall maintained and tidy standard. And then invoice at the bottom, I'll put I've cleaned the porch doors for you, and I'll just put nothing next to it, like 000, so she can see that she's not being charged, but I mention it. Same with the mulch top up, you know, 1 trailer, whatever, or, you know, 1 ton bag mulch, and I'll just not charge for it. So again, the customer can see that, hey, he's done that for us, you know, thank you. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think I got any extra thank you, but, you know, if that's what's part of the service, and she can, you know, she's paying for that service, and she can think, oh, you know, this garden's looking after this ground for me, you know. Another thing as well, so next job I'll talk about is, there's lessons from each of this is why I mention it. Paperwork is so important. Invoicing, I use Zoho Books, And what I used to use before, I used to just generate it. I used to make an invoice. So I used to type one out, and on that I used to put, you know, all different stuff, like my details of the property, date of visit to the property, description of work. And one of them I missed, so I didn't used to put invoice numbers, and I should have done. And this was where I think this was how I got overpaid. But I know why I got overpaid. I've worked it out now. I mentioned that a bit back. I know why I got overpaid. She'd read the receipt as an invoice and paid for that as well. So that's how I got overpaid. But I'll get onto that in a little bit. But always make sure your paperwork's on top. Really, really do. Put invoice numbers on. I use Zoho Books, it's free. And it's really easy actually once you get used to it. And getting used to it isn't that hard, to be fair. I make it sound harder than it is. But that's another thing, trust. So if you get overpaid or if you get underpaid, well, definitely chase them up if you're getting underpaid. If you get overpaid, my opinion is to tell them. Even if they overpay you by 20 quid, just let them know that there's been an overpayment on the invoice, and I'll deduct it from the next one, whatever. And the reason I do that is because I think if people trust you, they leave you alone. That extra 20 quid, they'll probably pick up on it at some point, or they might have even picked up on it straight away, but they'd sent they'd sent the payment through, whatever. But I do believe in being upfront and honest, and that 20 quid to you is nothing, but giving them that back and letting them know, it's saying, hey, he's on the ball, he's hot on here. So, you know, as I said, trust. Basically, the letter from this, if they trust you, they'll leave you alone. So I hope this video was helped, guys. Have a good day.